"Don't touch that bag," the saleswoman snapped loud enough for the entire boutique to hear, never realizing the quiet woman holding the worn leather folder was about to buy every luxury bag in the building before sunset. The marble floors of Beaumont and Row reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers hanging 30 feet above the showroom, bathing the boutique in soft golden light that made every designer handbag shimmer like jewelry in a museum case. On a busy Friday afternoon in downtown Chicago, wealthy clients moved slowly between velvet displays while associates in black tailored uniforms offered champagne in thin crystal flutes. Then the front doors opened, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Evelyn Carter stepped quietly inside wearing faded blue jeans, white sneakers with slightly worn soles, and a light gray cardigan that looked more practical than fashionable. Her blonde hair was tied loosely behind her neck, and an old silver necklace rested gently against her collarbone. In her right hand, she carried a weathered brown folder with a gold-embossed seal barely visible beneath her fingers. Several customers glanced toward her before quickly looking away. The younger sales associates exchanged subtle smirks. Evelyn noticed every stare, but her expression never changed. She had seen those looks before, the kind that quietly decided your worth before you even spoke. Near the center display stood Vanessa Whitmore, the boutique's senior sales manager, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s with perfect makeup, diamond earrings, and the cold confidence that came from years of controlling who belonged in luxury spaces and who did not. Vanessa looked Evelyn up and down once before turning back toward an affluent customer examining a limited edition Italian handbag. "That collection starts at $18,000, Vanessa said loudly, making sure Evelyn could hear every word. Some people like to browse just to feel included. A few customers chuckled softly. Evelyn remained calm and slowly approached a glass display holding the boutique's newest arrivals. Resting under the spotlight was a rare cream-colored belladonna handbag crafted in Florence, one of only 12 made in the world. Evelyn's eyes softened slightly when she saw it. Her fingers hovered carefully near the leather. "Please don't touch that bag," Vanessa barked sharply, stepping forward in her high heels. The room fell quiet almost instantly. "Those are reserved for serious clients only." Evelyn pulled her hand back politely. "I was only admiring the craftsmanship," she said softly. Vanessa crossed her arms. "Admiring is free. Damaging it is not." Another associate laughed under her breath while two wealthy women nearby exchanged amused looks. One whispered, "People really walk in anywhere these days." Evelyn lowered her eyes briefly, but not from shame. From patience. Around her neck, the old silver necklace caught the chandelier light for a split second, revealing a tiny engraved crest hidden near the clasp. Vanessa never noticed it. Neither did the customers staring at Evelyn like she was an inconvenience standing in the wrong world. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable at the outlet mall on West Monroe," Vanessa continued with a thin smile. "Our clientele expects a certain environment." The humiliation spread across the showroom like heat. Even a young sales associate named Claire looked visibly uncomfortable as she watched the exchange unfold beside the register counter. Evelyn slowly tightened her grip on the worn leather folder. Inside it sat several folded property transfer agreements, acquisition papers, and a sealed envelope from Beaumont Luxury Group itself. But no one could see that yet. Vanessa glanced toward the security guard near the entrance and sighed dramatically. "I'm asking nicely, ma'am. Please don't create a scene." Evelyn finally looked directly at her, calm blue eyes steady and unreadable. "I'm not the one creating the scene," she replied quietly. The answer caught Vanessa off guard for half a second, but arrogance quickly returned to her face. "Then perhaps you should leave before this becomes embarrassing." At that exact moment, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom slowly pulled up outside the boutique's front entrance, visible through the towering glass windows. Several customers turned their heads instinctively. The driver stepped out first, wearing white gloves before opening the rear passenger door. And for the very first time that afternoon, the room inside Beaumont and Row began to feel uncertain. The soft rumble of the Rolls-Royce engine outside the boutique lasted only a few seconds before the car slowly pulled away from the curb again, leaving behind a strange silence that settled uneasily across the showroom. Vanessa Whitmore glanced toward the window with mild annoyance before returning her attention to Evelyn, as though dismissing her had become the most important task of the afternoon. "Now then," Vanessa said smoothly, adjusting the gold bracelet on her wrist. As I mentioned before, these pieces are part of our private collection. They are not meant for casual handling. Evelyn stood quietly beside the display, her reflection faintly visible in the polished marble floor beneath her worn sneakers. Around her, women draped in designer coats carried leather handbags worth more than most monthly mortgages. Champagne glasses sparkled beneath chandelier light, while soft piano music drifted through hidden speakers in the ceiling. Every detail inside Beaumont and Rowe whispered wealth, exclusivity, and status. And in the middle of it stood Evelyn, looking painfully out of place in the eyes of nearly everyone watching. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, her smile never fully reaching her eyes. I understand luxury stores can be exciting to visit, she continued carefully, using the same tone someone might use with a child wandering into the wrong room. But our serious clients expect a certain level of discretion and professionalism. A wealthy woman standing nearby glanced openly at Evelyn's cardigan and whispered something to her husband that earned a quiet chuckle. Claire, the younger associate behind the counter, looked increasingly uncomfortable. She noticed details the others ignored. The old silver necklace, the calm posture, the fact that Evelyn had never once appeared intimidated despite the growing humiliation surrounding her. Most people would have either argued or left by now. Evelyn did neither. She simply observed. I was hoping to ask a few questions about the Belladonna collection, Evelyn said politely. Vanessa exhaled slowly through her nose as though even the request inconvenienced her. The Belladonna collection is invitation only, she replied. Most of our buyers have established purchase histories well into 7 figures. Her eyes drifted deliberately toward Evelyn's faded jeans. It is not really intended for casual shoppers. The words landed softly, but the cruelty underneath them was unmistakable. Another sales associate approached carrying velvet trays of jewelry toward a private fitting room where a social media influencer and her entourage were laughing loudly over custom orders. The contrast inside the boutique could not have been sharper. One group was welcomed with sparkling water, personal attention, and smiles. The other woman was being quietly pushed toward the door simply because she looked ordinary. Evelyn carefully rested her worn leather folder against the glass counter for a moment. As it shifted slightly, the gold embossed seal became briefly visible beneath the light. Claire noticed it immediately. Her brow furrowed. The symbol looked strangely familiar, though she could not place where she had seen it before. Before she could think further, Vanessa stepped closer again. Ma'am, I truly do not want to embarrass you further, she said, lowering her voice while somehow making the moment feel even more public. But these clients are preparing for private appointments. Perhaps another boutique would better suit your needs. Evelyn slowly lifted her eyes toward the second-floor balcony, where framed black and white photographs of Beaumont and Rowe founders lined the walls. Her gaze lingered on one photograph longer than expected. An older man standing beside the boutique's original storefront nearly 70 years earlier wore a silver crest pin identical to the tiny symbol hanging from Evelyn's necklace. Claire noticed that too. A small chill ran through her. Vanessa, however, remained oblivious. Security may need to intervene if this becomes disruptive, she added gently, though the threat underneath her polished tone was impossible to miss. The room fell quiet again. Several customers pretended not to stare while openly listening to every word. Evelyn finally picked up the leather folder and held it calmly against her chest. You seem very certain about who belongs here, she said softly. Vanessa smiled with absolute confidence. Experience teaches you those things. Evelyn gave the faintest nod, almost as if confirming something privately to herself. Then her eyes drifted once more toward the front windows just as a second black vehicle slowly pulled up outside the boutique, longer and even more expensive than the first. This time, 2 men in dark suits stepped out carrying silver document cases. And suddenly, Claire realized why the crest on Evelyn's necklace looked familiar. The 2 men outside adjusted their dark overcoats against the cold Chicago wind before entering the boutique with calm, deliberate steps. One carried a polished silver document case, while the other spoke quietly into an earpiece. Their presence alone shifted the atmosphere near the entrance. Even the security guard standing beside the marble doorway straightened his posture instinctively. Inside Beaumont and Rowe, however, Vanessa Whitmore remained focused on Evelyn as though determined to finish what she had started. "I think we have exhausted this conversation," Vanessa said smoothly. "There are guests here with scheduled appointments." She gestured subtly toward the elegant customers gathered near the private showroom lounge, where champagne glasses sparkled beneath soft chandelier light. A tall woman wrapped in a white cashmere coat glanced toward Evelyn and sighed impatiently. "Honestly, Vanessa, this is becoming uncomfortable," she murmured. "Some of us are here to shop." Another customer standing beside her gave Evelyn a quick once-over before whispering, "You can usually tell immediately who belongs in places like this." Claire heard every word. Her stomach tightened. She looked back toward Evelyn, expecting frustration or embarrassment, but the quiet woman simply rested one hand gently over the worn leather folder and observed the room with unsettling calm. It was not the calm of someone defeated. It was the calm of someone waiting. The boutique's assistant manager, Richard Hale, finally approached after noticing the growing attention from customers. He was a silver-haired man in an expensive navy suit whose polished smile had been perfected through decades of luxury retail. "Is there a problem here?" he asked carefully. Vanessa folded her arms with quiet confidence. "Nothing serious. This woman continues attempting to access restricted merchandise despite repeated explanations regarding store policy." Richard turned politely toward Evelyn. His eyes drifted briefly across her cardigan, jeans, and worn sneakers before settling on the old silver necklace resting against her collarbone. "Ma'am," he said in a measured tone, "our private collections are generally reserved for established clients with appointments." Evelyn nodded slightly. "I understand." Vanessa looked almost triumphant hearing the response. "Wonderful," she said quickly. "Then we can finally move forward." But Evelyn did not leave. Instead, she slowly opened the leather folder just enough to glance at the top document inside. Claire caught a brief glimpse of embossed stationery carrying the Beaumont Luxury Group insignia alongside several official signatures. Her pulse quickened. Evelyn closed the folder calmly again before lifting her eyes toward Richard. "May I ask one question first?" she said softly. Richard maintained his professional smile. "Of course." Evelyn looked toward the framed black and white founder portrait hanging above the staircase. "How long has this location been in the Whitmore Family Partnership Program?" Richard blinked once, clearly surprised by the question. Vanessa's expression tightened slightly. "Excuse me." Evelyn remained composed. "The founder partnership agreements. Beaumont and Rowe only allowed 3 family operators during the 1960s expansion. I was curious how long your branch has been associated with the program." The room grew strangely quiet. Vanessa gave a small laugh, meant to recover control of the moment. "That information is not public knowledge," she replied sharply. "And frankly, I do not see how it concerns you." Evelyn nodded again, almost thoughtfully. "I see." Richard's eyes narrowed subtly now, studying her more carefully than before. Most customers would never know anything about the original partnership program. Claire noticed the same realization crossing his face. Before anyone could speak further, one of the men who had entered moments earlier approached the front counter carrying the silver case. The boutique fell nearly silent as he removed a pair of white gloves and scanned the showroom calmly. His gaze landed directly on Evelyn. Vanessa stepped forward immediately, assuming authority once more. "Sir, private consultations are upstairs," she began politely. "If you are here for an appointment, I would be happy to assist you." The man barely acknowledged her. Instead, he gave Evelyn a respectful nod. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "the board representatives have arrived earlier than expected." The temperature inside the room seemed to drop all at once. Claire watched Vanessa's confident smile freeze for the first time that afternoon. And beside the glass display of luxury handbags, Evelyn finally reached up and touched the small silver crest hanging from her necklace. Vanessa Whitmore recovered quickly, though the sudden stiffness in her posture betrayed the panic beginning to rise beneath her polished exterior. "I believe there has been some confusion," she said smoothly, stepping between Evelyn and the man holding the silver document case. "Our boutique is currently hosting private clients, so if there is business related to corporate matters, it should be handled through scheduled executive channels." The man looked at her without expression. "The executive channels instructed us to come here directly." The silence that followed seemed to echo across the marble showroom. Customers who moments earlier had been pretending not to watch were now openly staring. Richard Hale adjusted his tie uneasily, while Claire stood frozen behind the register, her mind racing through every detail she had noticed since Evelyn entered the boutique. The crest necklace, the founder photograph, the embossed seal inside the folder. None of it made sense anymore. Vanessa forced a small laugh, trying desperately to regain control of the room. Well, regardless of who anyone is, she said. Carefully, store policy still applies. We cannot allow disruptions during active client hours. Her eyes shifted back toward Evelyn with sharpened authority. And frankly, this situation has already become inappropriate. Evelyn remained perfectly calm beside the glass display of handbags worth more than luxury sedans. The soft piano music overhead continued playing while waitstaff quietly removed untouched champagne glasses from nearby tables, uncertain whether to stay or disappear. Outside the towering windows, downtown Chicago traffic rolled past beneath gray afternoon skies, completely unaware that the atmosphere inside Beaumont and Rowe was beginning to fracture. Vanessa folded her arms tightly now. "Ma'am, I am going to ask you once more to leave the showroom floor." The words landed harder this time because of the audience surrounding them. A few customers shifted awkwardly, while others watched with quiet fascination. One older woman wearing a pearl-white coat shook her head softly and whispered to her companion, "This is exactly why luxury businesses have standards." Another customer murmured, "If she really belonged here, this would not even be happening." Evelyn heard every word, yet her face never hardened. She simply rested her fingers lightly against the silver crest hanging from her necklace, as though grounding herself in something far older and more important than the opinions filling the room. Richard finally stepped closer beside Vanessa. "Perhaps it would be best if we de-escalate this privately," he suggested cautiously. But Vanessa was too committed now to back away gracefully. Years of controlling this boutique had convinced her she could always recognize power on sight. Tailored suits, designer watches, platinum cards, private chauffeurs. She had built her entire career around judging who mattered within seconds of looking at them. And Evelyn Carter looked like none of those things. "Security," Vanessa said firmly without taking her eyes off Evelyn. The guard near the entrance hesitated before slowly approaching. Claire's stomach dropped. Even the man with the silver case looked visibly uncomfortable now. "This is unnecessary," he said, evenly. Vanessa ignored him completely. Beaumont and Rowe reserves the right to refuse service when clients create discomfort within the shopping environment, she announced loudly enough for the room to hear. And unfortunately, this situation has disrupted the experience for our valued guests. The humiliation settled heavily across the showroom. No shouting, no insults, just polished cruelty wrapped inside corporate language. Evelyn slowly lifted the leather folder from the counter and held it carefully in both hands. Then she looked directly at Vanessa for several quiet seconds. "You know," Evelyn said softly, "the strange thing about legacy businesses is that the people protecting them are often the first to forget what built them." The room went completely still. Vanessa frowned slightly, unsettled by the weight behind the words even if she did not fully understand them. Claire noticed Richard's expression change instantly. He understood, or at least part of him suddenly feared he did. Before anyone could respond, the second suited man near the entrance opened the silver document case and removed a dark navy folder stamped with the gold insignia of Beaumont Luxury Group Corporate Holdings. He looked directly toward Evelyn again. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "the acquisition transfer documents are ready for your signature whenever you wish to proceed." The words acquisition transfer documents seemed to drain the air from the showroom all at once. Several customers exchanged confused glances while the soft piano music overhead suddenly felt painfully out of place against the silence spreading across the boutique. Vanessa Whitmore stood frozen beside the glass display, though years of corporate composure kept her expression carefully controlled. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," she said finally, forcing a restrained smile. "This boutique is independently operated under Beaumont Luxury Group licensing. Any acquisition matters would involve regional executives, not." Her voice faded slightly as her eyes drifted back toward Evelyn's worn cardigan and faded jeans, as though her mind physically could not reconcile the image standing in front of her. With the words she had just heard, the suited representative calmly opened the navy folder. Gold embossed pages reflected beneath the chandelier light, while official corporate seals became visible near the bottom corners. Richard Hale leaned closer instinctively, his face slowly losing color. Claire watched him carefully. She had worked under Richard long enough to recognize fear when she saw it. "Sir," Richard said quietly to the representative, "may I ask exactly who authorized this transfer review?" The man looked toward Evelyn before answering. The authorization came directly from the Carter Family Trust. The name landed heavily in the room. Claire's eyes widened instantly. Across the showroom, one older customer nearly dropped her champagne glass. Even Richard blinked hard at the words. The Carter Family Trust was not simply wealthy. It was legendary within luxury retail. For nearly 60 years, the Carter family had quietly owned controlling interests in several elite fashion houses across Europe and the United States, including minority holdings tied to Beaumont Luxury Group itself. Vanessa gave a short, nervous laugh. That cannot possibly be related to her. The confidence in her voice sounded thinner now. Much thinner. Evelyn remained calm beside the display case, gently tracing one finger along the edge of the leather folder in her hands. She did not interrupt. She did not correct anyone. That silence unsettled the room more than anger ever could have. Claire suddenly remembered something from orientation training years earlier. A framed photograph inside corporate onboarding materials. An image of Beaumont and Rowe's original investors standing beside company founders decades ago. One family name had appeared repeatedly beneath the archival captions. Carter. Claire slowly looked from the portrait upstairs to the silver crest hanging around Evelyn's neck. Her pulse quickened again. Vanessa noticed the shifting expressions around her and straightened immediately, desperate to regain authority before it fully slipped away. "Regardless of whatever this paperwork claims," she said sharply, "we still have policies regarding showroom conduct. This woman arrived without identification, without appointment credentials, and disrupted private client services." The words sounded increasingly hollow as she spoke them. Richard looked visibly uncomfortable now. "Vanessa," he muttered under his breath, "perhaps we should slow down." But Vanessa could not stop. Pride had carried her too far already. "People cannot simply walk into luxury establishments pretending to have influence," she continued. "That is not how this industry works." Evelyn finally lifted her eyes toward her. Calm, steady, almost sympathetic. "No," Evelyn said softly. "It usually works exactly like this." The room fell silent again. At that exact moment, Claire's computer terminal near the register emitted a sharp notification tone. An internal corporate alert had appeared automatically across the boutique system. Claire stared at the screen. Her hands slowly covered her mouth. Richard noticed her expression immediately. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Claire swallowed hard before turning the monitor slightly toward him. Displayed across the top of the system in bold gold lettering were the words "Executive Ownership Transition Pending." Beneath it sat a verified executive profile photograph. The image showed a younger version of Evelyn standing beside Beaumont Luxury Group board members at a charity gala in New York several years earlier. Her hair was styled differently then, her clothing elegant and formal, but her eyes were unmistakable. Below the photograph appeared a title that made Richard's face go pale. Evelyn Carter, Primary Trustee Representative, Beaumont Luxury Group Holdings. Claire slowly looked back toward the quiet woman everyone had spent the afternoon humiliating. Vanessa followed her gaze at last. And for the first time since Evelyn walked into the boutique, uncertainty finally appeared in Vanessa Whitmore's eyes. Vanessa Whitmore stared at the monitor for several long seconds as though refusing to believe what she was seeing. Around her, the boutique had gone unnaturally quiet. Even the customers who had mocked Evelyn earlier now stood frozen beside glass displays and velvet chairs, their attention locked on the glowing executive profile visible on Claire's screen. Richard Hale slowly removed his glasses, his face pale beneath the chandelier light. "Vanessa," he said carefully, "I think we need to contact regional corporate immediately." But Vanessa's pride refused to surrender. Years of status, control, and reputation had built walls too thick for humility to enter quickly. She straightened her posture again and folded her arms tightly across her designer blazer. "No," she said sharply. "I am not going to let one confusing system notification derail this boutique in front of clients." Claire looked stunned. "But the profile is verified," she whispered. "It came directly from corporate ownership access." Vanessa turned toward her instantly. Systems can be manipulated. Her voice carried across the room now, colder and louder than before. Do you honestly believe someone dressed like this is secretly controlling Beaumont Luxury Group? The words hit the room like shattered glass. Several customers lowered their eyes immediately, embarrassed by how cruel the statement sounded now. But Vanessa continued, unable to stop herself. This entire situation is absurd, she said. Luxury brands are built on image, presentation, and standards. People who represent companies like Beaumont do not walk into flagship boutiques looking like they came from a grocery store parking lot. A hush fell across the showroom. Evelyn stood silently near the belladonna display, one hand resting lightly on the worn leather folder while the silver crest necklace shimmered softly against her cardigan. She looked neither angry nor humiliated anymore, only tired. Tired in the way someone becomes after watching the same mistake repeated too many times across too many years. The suited representative beside her shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Whitmore, he warned carefully, I strongly advise you to stop speaking. Vanessa ignored him completely. No, she snapped. I would actually like answers now. If this woman truly has authority here, then why hide it? Why walk and dress like this? Why create confusion? Evelyn finally lifted her eyes toward her. Calm blue eyes. Steady and unreadable. I did not create the confusion, she said quietly. I only walked through the door. The room went silent again. Richard closed his eyes briefly as though realizing disaster had already become unavoidable. Claire looked back at the monitor once more, scrolling nervously through the executive profile details. Then she froze. Richard, she whispered urgently. There is more. Richard stepped closer. Claire pointed toward a section near the bottom of the executive authorization page labeled Immediate Ownership Review Authorization. Beneath it sat a digital signature timestamped less than 2 hours earlier. Evelyn Carter, Acting Majority Trustee, pending full acquisition of Beaumont and Row Chicago flagship. Richard's face lost the rest of its color. Oh my God, he breathed softly. Several nearby customers overheard him and immediately began whispering among themselves. Vanessa noticed the panic spreading around her and suddenly made the worst decision of the entire afternoon. Enough, she said firmly, turning toward the security guard near the entrance. Escort her out until corporate verifies all of this nonsense properly. The guard hesitated visibly. Ms. Whitmore, I do not think. That is an instruction, Vanessa interrupted sharply. The room held its breath. Slowly, Evelyn opened the worn leather folder for the first time fully in public. Thick cream-colored documents rested inside beside official seals, acquisition contracts, and a black fountain pen engraved with the Beaumont founding crest. Then, with calm, deliberate movements, she removed a small silver key attached to an old leather keychain and placed it gently onto the glass display counter. Claire gasped softly the moment she saw it. Richard froze completely, because every executive manager inside Beaumont Luxury Group knew exactly what that key represented. The original private vault key to the founder archive room beneath the Chicago flagship. A key that only direct ownership trustees were allowed to possess. Evelyn looked quietly toward Richard. Would you mind checking whether the archive room still recognizes my access code? She asked softly. Nobody in the boutique moved. Nobody spoke. And for the first time all afternoon, Vanessa Whitmore looked genuinely afraid. No one inside Beaumont and Row moved after Evelyn placed the silver key onto the glass counter. The boutique had become so quiet that the faint ticking of the wall clock near the staircase suddenly sounded unnaturally loud beneath the chandeliers. Vanessa Whitmore stood completely still, her face pale now, though traces of stubborn pride still clung desperately to her expression. Richard Hale slowly reached toward the key with trembling fingers, recognizing the engraved founder crest etched into the worn silver surface. This cannot be real, Vanessa whispered under her breath. But Richard already knew it was. Only 3 vault keys had ever existed since the Chicago flagship opened in 1964. One belonged to Beaumont Corporate Archives in New York. One remained secured in the Founder Estate Trust. And the third belonged exclusively to the Carter family trustees. Richard swallowed hard before looking back toward Evelyn with entirely different eyes now. Ma'am, he said quietly, almost respectfully. The archive room has not been opened in nearly 12 years. Evelyn nodded softly. I know. Claire stared at her in disbelief. The woman standing calmly beside the handbag display no longer looked small or out of place. Somehow the entire room itself seemed to shift around her now, as though the boutique had finally remembered who truly belonged there all along. The suited representative beside Evelyn carefully opened the navy folder again and removed several final pages secured with gold clips. Pending signatures, he explained evenly. The Carter Family Trust becomes majority controlling owner of Beaumont and Row Chicago effective today. A collective murmur spread across the showroom. Customers who had once watched Evelyn with amusement now stood frozen with embarrassment creeping across their faces. The older woman in the white cashmere coat quietly lowered her champagne glass. Another customer slowly stepped backward from the display she had been browsing moments earlier. Vanessa looked from face to face, realizing the room had turned against her without anyone speaking a word. "No," she said, suddenly, shaking her head once. "This does not make sense. If you were truly connected to the Carter family, you would not." Her eyes dropped once more toward Evelyn's jeans and cardigan before the sentence died halfway out of her mouth. Evelyn finished it for her gently. "Dressed like this?" Vanessa said nothing. Evelyn glanced quietly around the boutique. "My grandfather used to visit stores exactly this way," she said softly. "He believed people reveal who they truly are when they think someone has nothing to offer them." Richard lowered his eyes immediately. Claire felt a chill run through her chest. The room remained completely silent. Evelyn slowly opened the leather folder fully now. Inside rested original founder agreements, property transfers, executive ownership documents, and photographs dating back decades. One black and white image showed a young girl standing beside the Beaumont founders inside this exact boutique during its grand opening ceremony. Even as a child, the silver crest necklace around her neck was unmistakable. Claire stared at the photograph. "That is you," she whispered. Evelyn gave a small nod. "My family helped finance this location before most of the city even believed luxury retail could survive here." Vanessa's face drained of color entirely. "You are Evelyn Carter," she breathed. The suited representative answered before Evelyn could. "Primary trustee of the Carter Family Trust. Majority investor in Beaumont Luxury Group. And beginning today, acting owner of this flagship location." The words settled heavily across the marble showroom like judgment itself. Vanessa opened her mouth slightly, but no sound came out. Her confidence, her authority, the polished superiority she had worn all afternoon collapsed in complete silence. Around her, employees who once followed her lead now looked at Evelyn with stunned respect. Claire straightened instinctively behind the counter, while even the security guard stepped back quietly toward the entrance. Evelyn remained calm through all of it. No anger, no triumph, no cruelty. She simply rested the founder key gently beside the belladonna handbag Vanessa had forbidden her from touching. Then, she looked toward the rows of luxury bags displayed beneath the chandeliers. "I came here today because I wanted to see whether this boutique still understood the meaning of dignity," she said softly. Her eyes finally returned to Vanessa. "Now I know." And in that moment, Vanessa Whitmore understood that the quiet woman she had judged all afternoon did not merely belong inside Beaumont and Row. She owned the future of it. The silence inside Beaumont and Row lingered long after the truth had been revealed. Crystal chandeliers still glowed warmly above the showroom. Soft piano music still drifted through hidden speakers, and expensive handbags still rested beneath glass displays exactly where they had been an hour earlier. Yet somehow the boutique no longer felt like the same place. The atmosphere had changed completely. Customers who once stood comfortably behind Vanessa Whitmore now avoided eye contact altogether. Several quietly set down champagne glasses and stepped away from the displays as though embarrassed to remain part of the scene they had watched unfold. Vanessa herself looked almost unrecognizable without her confidence. The sharp authority she carried so proudly throughout the afternoon had disappeared, replaced by something far heavier. Realization. Richard Hale slowly cleared his throat beside her. "Ms. Carter," he began carefully. "On behalf of Beaumont and Row Chicago, I sincerely apologize for the treatment you experienced here today." Evelyn looked toward him calmly. "Thank you, Richard." Her voice remained gentle, which somehow made the shame inside the room feel even stronger. Vanessa swallowed hard before finally forcing herself to speak. "I did not know who you were," she said quietly. The words barely rose above a whisper. Evelyn studied her for a moment before answering. That is exactly the problem. The room fell silent again. Vanessa lowered her eyes immediately. Claire stood motionless behind the register, watching the exchange unfold with a mixture of relief and heartbreak. She had seen difficult customers before. She had seen rude executives, arrogant clients, and impossible situations. But she had never witnessed someone expose an entire culture with nothing more than patience and dignity. One of the older customers near the lounge finally stepped forward awkwardly. It was the same woman in the white cashmere coat who earlier questioned whether Evelyn belonged inside the boutique at all. "Ms. Carter," she said softly, visibly uncomfortable, "I owe you an apology as well." Evelyn gave her a polite nod, but said nothing. No lecture. No humiliation. No revenge. That silence carried more grace than anger ever could have. Vanessa slowly looked around the showroom, realizing every employee and customer had witnessed her behavior from beginning to end. The polished image she spent years building inside Beaumont and Rowe now stood exposed beneath the same chandelier lights she once used to judge others. Richard exhaled heavily before turning toward the staff. "Effective immediately," he announced carefully. "All customer interaction policies will undergo executive review." His eyes drifted meaningfully toward Vanessa. This company was not built to measure human value through clothing or appearances. Evelyn quietly closed the leather folder and rested her hand once more against the old silver necklace at her collarbone. "My grandfather used to say luxury means nothing if dignity disappears from the room," she said softly. Several employees lowered their eyes. Even the security guard near the entrance looked visibly ashamed for stepping forward earlier. Claire finally gathered enough courage to approach Evelyn directly. "I am sorry for not speaking up sooner," she admitted quietly. Evelyn looked at her warmly for the first time all afternoon. "You noticed what others ignored," she replied. "That matters more than you think." Tears nearly formed in Claire's eyes at the words. Nearby customers exchanged uncomfortable glances with one another, suddenly forced to confront how quickly they had judged a woman simply because her cardigan looked inexpensive and her sneakers were worn. Nobody had asked who she was. Nobody had cared enough to treat her kindly before they believed she held power. And that truth settled heavily across the boutique. Vanessa finally stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Slightly now. Ms. Carter, I truly am sorry." Evelyn looked at her for several long seconds before answering. "I believe you are sorry," she said gently. "But the next person who walks through these doors wearing simple clothes may not own this company." Vanessa's face fell completely. The lesson landed harder than any punishment could have. Evelyn then turned quietly toward the belladonna handbag still resting beneath the spotlight display. She picked it up carefully, admiring the craftsmanship she had originally come to see before the humiliation began. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, she calmly looked around the showroom and said, "Please prepare every handbag currently on display for purchase and donation packaging." The entire room froze again. "Every bag," Claire whispered. Evelyn nodded softly. "There are women across Chicago rebuilding their lives who deserve to walk into interviews, meetings, and opportunities feeling seen and valued." Her eyes moved slowly across the room. Luxury should remind people of dignity, not take it away. And in the heavy silence that followed, nobody inside Beaumont and Rowe would ever look at simple clothing the same way again. The atmosphere inside Beaumont and Rowe remained hushed as employees carefully began removing handbags from their illuminated displays one by one. Velvet shelves that once symbolized exclusivity now stood partially empty beneath the warm chandelier light, while staff moved quietly through the boutique with a level of humility the store had not shown earlier that afternoon. No one complained. No one questioned the decision. The same customers who had once watched Evelyn Carter with judgment now observed her with something entirely different. Respect. Claire personally wrapped each handbag with extraordinary care, placing them into cream-colored boxes lined with gold tissue paper. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear anymore, but from the overwhelming realization that one ordinary afternoon had changed the entire culture of the boutique forever. Near the front windows, Richard Hale reviewed the finalized transfer documents with the corporate representatives while speaking in a far quieter tone than usual. Every few moments his eyes drifted toward Evelyn as though still struggling to process the fact that the woman he nearly allowed to be removed from the building now controlled its future. Vanessa Whitmore stood near the staircase in complete silence. The sharp confidence she once carried had vanished entirely. She watched employees moving respectfully around Evelyn and understood with painful clarity that power had never truly belonged to expensive clothes, polished titles, or exclusive guest lists. Real power had walked into the boutique wearing worn sneakers and a gray cardigan, while everyone else failed to recognize it. Evelyn slowly approached the main counter where the Belladonna handbag still rested beneath the spotlight display. For a moment, she simply looked at it quietly, remembering how a single attempt to admire its craftsmanship had triggered everything that followed. Claire stepped closer carrying the final purchase authorization forms. "Everything is ready, Ms. Carter," she said softly. Evelyn smiled gently. "Thank you, Claire." She took the black fountain pen engraved with the Beaumont crest and signed the final ownership documents with calm, deliberate movements. The sound of the pen against paper seemed to echo through the silent showroom. One signature officially transferred majority operational control of Beaumont and Row Chicago into her hands. When she finished, Richard carefully collected the papers almost reverently. "The transaction is complete," he announced quietly. Nobody applauded. Nobody spoke. The silence itself carried far more weight than noise ever could. Evelyn then turned toward Claire once more. "I reviewed your employee record before arriving today," she said softly. Claire blinked in surprise. "My record?" Evelyn nodded. 3 separate customer commendations in the last year. Each one mentioned kindness. Claire looked stunned. "I was only doing my job." Evelyn shook her head gently. "No, you were seeing people." The words visibly affected several employees standing nearby. Then, to everyone's surprise, Evelyn removed a small cream-colored card from her leather folder and handed it to Claire. "Beginning next month, Beaumont and Row will launch a new community partnership division focused on professional opportunity programs for women rebuilding their lives," she explained calmly. "I would like you to help lead it." Claire covered her mouth in disbelief. Tears filled her eyes almost instantly. "Ms. Carter, I do not even know what to say." Evelyn smiled softly. "Say yes." Claire nodded immediately, unable to hold back tears any longer. Across the showroom, Vanessa lowered her eyes. The contrast could not have been clearer. One employee had judged status. Another had quietly chosen decency. And only one of them walked away with a future transformed. Outside the boutique, the late afternoon Chicago sky had begun turning silver blue as city lights flickered alive along the avenue. Corporate representatives carried the final purchase boxes toward waiting vehicles, while customers silently stepped aside to let Evelyn pass. No one looked at her cardigan anymore. No one noticed the worn sneakers. All they saw now was the quiet dignity they had missed from the very beginning. At the front entrance, Evelyn paused briefly and looked back across the boutique one final time. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, velvet displays, expensive handbags. None of it mattered nearly as much as the lesson left behind inside those walls. She gently slipped the old silver founder key back into her pocket and rested one hand against the necklace at her collarbone. Then she looked toward Vanessa and spoke the final words of the afternoon in a calm voice the entire room would remember for years. "The easiest way to lose the soul of a company is to mistake luxury for superiority." A hush fell over the boutique once more. Then Evelyn Carter stepped through the glass doors into the cold Chicago evening, while everyone inside stood silently watching the quiet woman they had underestimated walk away with grace no amount of money could buy.